can heal and die. Music to me is truly the universal language because I have been blessed to travel around the world singing what I do. 5 of the 7 continents, singing, which I love to do, is gospel music and different forms of gospel music, different forms of religious music, and it's just really been a tremendous healing not only for me, but everywhere we go. It has been a tremendous teaching experience for me as well. I'm a preacher's kid, and so grew up in the church and ended up teaching myself to play the piano and direct the choir at age 14. And so I've been doing that now for the last 36 years here in Seattle. Well, I believe that music really brings about healing. When Hurricane Katrina hit on the Gulf Coast, our choir was on the ground. We raised enough money to get ourselves down there. But before we went down, we sent one of our choir members down in a rented truck. And we parked that truck at one of our local grocery stores. And we manned that truck for about 5 hours, and we advertised some free publicity for people just to come to the store and buy whatever. We gave them a list of things that they needed in Louisiana and in Mississippi. When we arrived in New Orleans and went to the lower Ninth Ward where the hurricane had done the most damage, and saw the despair on the people's faces, instead of just doing anything except singing at that moment. That's what they needed, an uplift. Everybody sing a song. Sing a song. Full of the hope of the dark past. Faith that the dark past has taught us. Sing a song. Sing a. So we just burst into a song. And we sang on the street corners, we sang in service stations, we sang in hospitals, we sang anywhere that we saw the despair on people's faces. We just started singing. Then we went on down to Gulfport, Mississippi, that was totally wiped out. Biloxi, a lot of little small towns around those 2 major little towns on the coast. And it was wiped as clean as your hand. There was nothing left. And we ran across a woman who asked us if we would come and sing to this elderly couple. We went over and sang to them, and we gave them gifts, and who had watched their son drown in the flood. So they needed a lot of consoling, and we did our best with the music to do it. And then we decided that we would fix their house. So we immediately got on the telephone, called back to Seattle, and arranged a fundraiser immediately. And we were able to raise enough money to go back down 2 months later, and we began rebuilding this person's house. We rebuilt it, and they're now living in it again. They'll never forget what happened, but they're doing good. Then there was an 80-year-old woman who said to me, if you all can help me, all I want to do is have my family together again on Thanksgiving, my children and my grandchildren. And I said to her, okay, we're going to help you. We're going to sing to you first. And we actually, Thanksgiving of 2009, she called me up and said, we are all in the house. We actually rebuilt her house from the ground up with the new guidelines and this kind of thing. And so she called me to say, Pastor Pat, this is the first time in 5 years that my entire family has been together on Thanksgiving. She said, thank you. Because not only do we rebuild them, we refurnish them too. We even curtains and toilet paper in the toilet, and everything to make it livable, even down to the forks, knives, and spoons, and glassware, everything that I would have in my own home. We refurnished both of those houses with those things. And so it was through the music, because the music was the means that we were able to receive the gifts. If it wasn't for the music, we wouldn't be able to heal the community. We're still there. We're going to go back in March of this year. And then we're going to go back again in June of this year, because we have another house to build. Facing the rising sun of our new day begun. So let us march on. hired by the Seattle Public Schools to be an ethnomusicologist back in the early 70s. My job was to go to various schools and teach my style of music, which is predominantly gospel. And it was going very, very well. As a matter of fact, a lot of the students were not going to the traditional music classes, but when they heard there was going to be a gospel choir established, my first class had 108 students in it. And they weren't all black. Matter of fact, the first group of students that I taught in this particular high school, I had 28 students to sign up for the class. 25 were white, 2 were Asian, and 1 was of mixed heritage. So there was no real black person in that first choir. But we had 3 weeks to get prepared to go to a national jazz festival. We raised the money really fast because they had money, and took the kids to this jazz festival. And they won 3rd place with just 3 weeks of rehearsal. First of all, you have to sing it in at least 3-part harmony, and it has to blend, and it has to sound like one voice. And we were able to do that in 3 weeks. When we came back to the school with those honors, then a lot of the kids of color said to me, "I'm getting in that choir. You guys, you're going to travel?" I said, "Yes. We can't hide this music under a bushel. We have to share it with the world." So my choir class grew so big that I had 3 different classes. I was supposed to be a floater going from school to school, but I ended up at that school more than I did any place else. There were so many kids who wanted to be a part of this class. Well, it was going so well, and 3 years later they said to me, "Oh, there's a separation of church and state. We can't let you teach that music in the public schools anymore." I said, "Really? We got all these students, you're going to tell them there's a separation of church and state. The teacher has to go because there's," I said, "Okay, I'm not going to argue with you." So at this point, we left the school system because we had no choice. I brought them to a local church, and I had to turn people away. It was just so many students who wanted to be a part of that choir, and we still are together 36 years later. And so it is very important that we teach our culture, that it is allowed to be taught, because all of us came from we came from the same tree, but a different branch. And there's nothing wrong with your style, my style, or anyone else's style, as long as it's sending out positive messages. Not proselytizing, but sending out positive messages. And the reason that I think we've been as successful as we have been for 36 years is because people can distinguish between proselytizing and accepting, "Wow, I like that stuff."